Hey everyone, this is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Green. I'd like to have a little talk with you about the events on January 6th that unfolded, that we all witnessed here at the Capitol.
Before we take a look at this video, I think it's important we learn a little bit about the controversial history of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Green. But first, the new intro courtesy of Peter from GonnaGoForIt YouTube channel. In 2017, the Congresswoman wrote for an online conspiracy website named American Truth Seekers. She wrote an article entitled "Police, Charlottesville an Insider Job," claiming that the neo-Nazi Alex James Fields Jr. that murdered a woman with his car isn't a Donald Trump supporter but a Hillary Clinton supporter, despite the facts to the contrary. Throughout the article, the Congresswoman attempts to whitewash the events of Unite the Right rally. Acknowledging Fields has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, she neglects to mention the inflammatory rhetoric which drove him to carry out his awful crime. Moving forward to her congressional campaign, the Congresswoman built upon her 2-year campaign of fear-mongering. This led to this image being posted on Facebook, where she is inciting violence towards Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib. Facebook removed the image within days, saying it violated the social network's policies. This was after making videos stating that white males are the most mistreated group of people in the US today, and people of colour are slaves to the Democrats. There's plenty to go through, so let's get started.
First, I want to thank all the police and everyone that protected the Capitol and protected all of the people inside from the violence that ensued. I'd also like to express how deeply sorry I am for the young woman that was killed and her family and friends. I don't condone violence, and I'm completely against it in any shape, form, and fashion.
In many instances, though not all, the law enforcement opened barriers to the insurgents. If they hadn't taken this action, this lady wouldn't have been in the Capitol to be shot. No loss of life should be celebrated, but this lady was guilty of insurrection, and the Secret Service fired to protect you and your colleagues' lives.
But I also want to talk to you about President Trump, and I want to talk to you about why it's not time to throw away your MAGA hat. It's actually time to put it on and wear it proudly. President Trump has worked hard for the past 4 years for the American people. He's the greatest president of my lifetime, and I know 75+ million American people feel the exact same way. In a time where the Democrats, the radical socialists, the organized groups that are funded by billionaires that are against our American values, the fake news media, and many people that you see online, big tech, and even the establishment and some Republicans are trying to burn Donald Trump to the ground and erase everything that he did for America, and by doing so, attack the American people who love America and love America First policies. They're trying to destroy all of this and erase everything.
The Democrats don't hate America. They stand for public office because they love it and want to improve it. Admitting there are flaws in a system does not mean you hate it. Considering the origins of the America First narrative, it is reasonable to stand against much of what it stands for. The American Constitution is incompatible with America First aims and goals, as the US constitutionally is a secular nation, which America First wants to change to an ethno-Christian state.
Let me remind you of just a few of the great things that President Trump has done for the American people and has accomplished over the past 4 years. Number one on the list, he moved our U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in Israel, recognizing Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel. And that's something that all of us hold dear in our hearts. And I myself am so grateful for him for doing that. He also brought historic peace deals to the Middle East, peace deals that no other president has been able to accomplish. He replaced NAFTA with the USMCA.
The move of the embassy to Jerusalem is a highly controversial move that has been condemned by most of the international community. On December 8th, 2 days after Donald Trump's announcement, the then Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, clarified the President's statements did not indicate any final status of Jerusalem and not an endorsement of it being the capital. It would also be left up to the two parties to negotiate and decide borders. When the move happened, Palestinian people peacefully protested. This predictably led to the Israeli Defense Force killing 58 people and injuring many more. The peace deals that were finalized under President Trump's administration was the culmination of years of negotiations. He was working from the foundations prior presidents had laid. It has been an accomplishment for sure, but he isn't solely to thank. Most of the provisions of USMCA are the same as that of NAFTA, to the point where most people don't notice any difference. I'm not sure why you think this is some great victory for Donald Trump.
He pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. He lowered prescription drug costs, helping millions of Americans. Under the Trump administration, the FDA has approved more affordable generic drugs than ever before.
By pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, President Trump has hindered America's ability to lead in developing the next generation of renewable technologies. This in turn will cost the American Treasury and economy trillions of dollars in future revenue. Historically, the US has been on the cutting edge of technological development, but this climate change denial by the general public and elected officials is harming efforts to address a very serious problem we all face. Between April 2018 and April 2019, data from the federal government shows a slight increase in prescription drug prices by 0.3%. This increase is slightly lower than April 17 to 18 of 0.7%. At the date of recording this, I was unable to find a fully cited source for the year April 19 to 20. This could have been due to the added strain due to COVID-19. Whether or not the FDA approves new drugs has little to do with who the president is, so I'm unsure why you raise this point.
He also secured 400 miles of the border with USA and Mexico, protecting our country from illegal immigration, violent crimes that has killed Americans, and also from deadly drugs that are dangerous to all Americans and our children.
As of 31st of October 2020, it has been reported that only 15 miles of new border wall has been built, with an additional 350 miles of replacement wall. This wall has been criticised as a waste of money from both sides of the political divide. Amongst the many reasons for this criticism is because it is of lesser quality, easier to cross, and is less able to withstand what nature can throw at it. In addition to this, one of Trump's longtime friends and business partners, Tommy Fisher, received contracts to build the wall, then proceeded to cut corners in construction and embezzled funds for his own financial gain. According to studies compiled over a 6-year period, immigrants crossing the southern border pose no increased risk of committing violent crimes compared to those crossing by other means. These studies even suggest that immigrants commit up to 77% less crimes than born citizens of the US.
He signed the Right to Try legislation. Under Trump's anti-trafficking coordination team, federal law enforcement has double convictions of human traffickers. He signed the measure funding prevention programs for veteran suicide. President Trump loves our veterans. He loves our military. He signed measure funding prevention programs for veteran suicide. Sorry, covered that one twice. He increased funding to historically black colleges by 17%. He signed Veterans Choice and Veterans Accountability Act.
As of 2015, 41 states had passed right to try laws. In 2017, a right to try bill was introduced and passed with unanimous consent. President Trump signed it in May 2018. At no point in its conception or drafting was President Trump involved. On the 31st of August 2012, it was President Barack Obama that signed Executive Order 13625 titled Improving Access to Mental Health Services for Veterans, Service Members and Families. This self-attribution Trump has tried is a disgusting attempt to rewrite history. In addition to this, federal funding had consistently increased for over 20 years before Trump took office. Why would anyone not expect this trend to continue? Trump also infamously stated he didn't respect those who were captured, and they weren't heroes. How does that translate to loving service and veteran personnel? The Veteran Access to Care Through Choice, Accountability and Transparency Act of 2014 was again signed by Barack Obama on the 7th of August 2014. It was John McCain and Bernie Sanders who negotiated the bipartisan initiative. Trump didn't increase funding for HBCUs. That was done via the bipartisan legislation dubbed the Future Act. Again, he's just signed and had nothing to do with the authorship of the bill.
He signed an executive order to expand school choice, Operation Legend, Operation Warp Speed, bringing a vaccine to many people that want one, and in record time during an attack from communist China with this horrible COVID-19 virus. Record time on creating that COVID vaccine. God bless President Trump and his administration for that.
There is no official executive order listed for expanding school choice. However, one was intended for the purpose of forcing public schools to reopen, risking exposure of both faculty and students unnecessarily to COVID-19. It was also intended to violate the Constitution by directly financing religious institutions. Operation Legend was an attempt to install a secret police to brutally violate people's First Amendment rights to peaceably assemble. Unmarked vehicles would pull up, plainclothes agents would get out and kidnap people without declaring who they were or why people were being unceremoniously forced into vehicles. This was often done a distance away from any ongoing protests. All of this was very reminiscent of the Gestapo. Operation Warp Speed is, in principle, one of the best ideas this administration had, to encourage the private and public sectors to work together to achieve common goals. However, this was hampered in the long term as in late 2019 Donald Trump disbanded the CDC's pandemic response team. This team's job was to coordinate efforts of the private and public sector to ensure federal and state actions are mutually beneficial. No agency was able to step in and fill this void. Also, Operation Warp Speed had nothing to do with the first vaccines. There is no attack from China. It is this kind of racist rhetoric that has hampered national response.
Quick action on suspending international travel during communist China virus, when leaders like Nancy Pelosi were saying there was nothing to worry about and we shouldn't close our borders.
The former Republican Senator for Georgia, David Perdue, received a briefing regarding COVID-19 on the 23rd of January, which indicated that it would be so severe that he sold his stocks just before they plummeted in value. On the 31st of January, the US declared a public health emergency due to COVID-19. On the 2nd of February, only people who visited Hubei were required to quarantine for 14 days. On the 2nd of March, this was extended to include anyone who had visited Iran. It wasn't until the 13th of March that the need to quarantine was expanded to include most of the EU. The UK and Ireland were excluded until the 14th of March, though the UK had the second highest infection rate in the EU after Italy. Nearly 2 months after David Perdue was informed how serious the virus was, and is, the US had finally closed its borders. How can anyone consider this quick action? And again, you end this point with more xenophobic rhetoric towards China.
Killing the ISIS terrorist al-Baghdadi and Iranian General Soleimani. God bless President Trump and the good people that took that effort on saving the world from these horrible terrorists. I don't condone violence, and I'm completely against it in any shape, form, and fashion.
Assassinating someone whilst on a sanctioned diplomatic mission to another nation is a violation of international laws, laws that Trump himself has criticised others for violating. What is also violating international laws is refusing to leave a sovereign nation that has democratically asked you to leave, as in the case of Iraq immediately after Soleimani's assassination. Trump intentionally risked all-out war with Iran for a publicity stunt. The US is known for its abilities to carry out covert assassinations, but decided to publicly carry out a drone strike at such a high-profile event, and you want to celebrate this?
Signed an executive order to protect American monuments because our history should be protected so that we can teach our children in the future.
Are you saying that statues are needed so Americans don't forget their history? What are schools for? Statues don't teach history, and too many people see them as honouring traitors to the US. During the brief occupation of the Capitol, Confederate flags were paraded in the halls and offices, dishonouring everyone who has ever sworn and upheld their oaths of office. This in no small way was due to the glorification of those that stood with the treasonous Confederacy. I now have to wonder if you would see a Lord Cornwallis statue in the US just as a lesson from history.
Getting tough on China, President Trump held China accountable and is the person that we needed in the White House to continue to do so. He was killing the TPP. Very, very important.
Shortly before Trump's team made concessions in trade negotiations with China, China approved 16 trademarks for Ivanka Trump. Though not conclusive on its own, this does seem rather convenient timing, especially for voting machines of all things. So what exactly did Trump hold China accountable for? Myri Solis, a foreign policy senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, reports the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have a positive impact on American people, creating at least 128,000 new jobs, increased wages, and increased buying power, equating to between $57 billion and $131 billion by 2032. The TPP would also decrease security risks, increase the number of goods exported, and make exports cheaper without having to reduce production costs or profit margins.
Appointing pro-life justices to the courts and to the Supreme Court withdrew from the one-sided Iran deal that President Barack Obama put this country in. Should have never happened, and the Democrats want to re-enter that deal. First president to step inside North Korea. President Trump is brave.
Amy Coney Barrett is not pro-life, she is pro-forced birth. No one who is pro-life would also be pro-death penalty, as these are mutually exclusive positions. She wishes women to be forced to give birth, even though there is significant risk to the lady's life, which again negates the pro-life position. Also, in addition to this, Trump nominated someone who he knew would intentionally violate the separation of religion and state, whilst also not knowing the rights protected under the First Amendment. The deal made with Iran wasn't one-sided, it benefited all involved. And now the US has withdrawn, there's new claims Iran has resumed its nuclear program. With all this context, how can it be said to be a good thing that the US left? Praising an extremely authoritarian regime, especially one who executes its own citizens for even being suspected of criticising the ruler, why would anyone think giving this regime even the appearance of legitimacy is something to boast about? Also, Trump's so brave he dodged the draft for no reason other than his daddy is rich.
First president to speak at the March for Life rally, President Trump protects the unborn. Responsible for the largest rescue of American hostages, even the ones Obama couldn't get because Obama failed. President Trump did not fail those hostages and their family.
Speaking at the March for Life rally as a sitting president is dangerously close to violating the separation of church and state. This rally is religiously driven by Christian organisers, and this action gives the impression that the office of the President of the United States endorses evangelical Christianity. Donald Trump's attitude towards hostage negotiations comes close to violating the US Patriots Act, passed in 2001 under George W. Bush. The reason he is able to do this is because Barack Obama ordered a review of the US hostage policy, which was concluded in the summer of 2015. The new policy kept the no concessions framework, but it provided additional latitude, allowing the US government to communicate with hostage takers even though they couldn't negotiate. As this new policy was introduced in the last 6 months of Obama's presidency, it's not surprising that Trump has been able to utilize it more.
Record number of regulations eliminated that hurt small businesses like the one my company owns, and many other millions of Americans who have been hurt during these shutdowns and this COVID-19 crisis, pandemic, politically used virus to hurt Americans. Creating the sixth branch of the military, the Space Force. We should be so proud, and we have President Trump to thank for that.
Trump's administration decreased the amount of taxes large corporations pay. This does not help small businesses in any way, shape or form. During the COVID crisis, businesses Trump has links to received millions of dollars in PPP loans, as did many wealthy corporations, whereas many mom and pop shops did not and are now permanently closed. Even churches were directly funded by the people's purse, again in violation of the Constitution. This administration wasted so much money creating this sixth branch of the military that now has nothing to do for the foreseeable future. That money could have been put to better use by investing in better and more robust scientific education for children, the children you claim Trump loves. Today, too many people believe in young earth creationism and flat earth for this money not to be put to better use. For the remaining 5 or 6 minutes of Congresswoman Taylor Green's video, she perpetuates conspiracy theories, blaming all the America's ills on Antifa, Black Lives Matter movement, Democrats, anybody that she doesn't like. What she doesn't seem to understand is Antifa isn't an organisation with a leadership, membership or funding, unlike the KKK, Proud Boys and many white nationalist groups. It's also the latter group which have been described by the FBI as being on the same threat level as ISIS, and people such as Pastor Greg Locke called for people to rise up against the government. And of course Charlie Kirk had plenty to say about fighting for the president. With people like this stoking the fires of insurrection, it's not hard to imagine why people would think it was a good idea to storm the Capitol or use the Trump train to drive Biden's tour bus off the road during the campaign and the election. At times like these, lessons must be learnt from history. Post-Civil War America, there was too much forgive and forget. That can't happen again, because this will happen again. Both houses must vote to impeach and remove Donald Trump from office. And then there needs to be legal action taken against him for all the insurrection, sedition, and just basic treason. Don't let him get away with this. And that goes for his enablers too. So Congresswoman Taylor Green, Senators Cruz and Hawley, Rudy Giuliani, all of them must be held accountable for what they have done to the United States of America. That's it for this video. If you think I've missed something or you think I'm wrong, please leave a comment down below and I will respond as best I can. I'd like to thank Divine Disbelief for helping me source this video. I couldn't have done it without them. Until next time, bye bye.